Good morning to you, Josie. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning, Rennie, and good morning to everyone listening in this morning as well.
It is good to have you here. Your years, while I was here in Trinidad, when I got to New York, you were there. When you go to London, you were there. You have been looking at this whole question of the cultural export, what we need to do about this, how seriously we need to take this, and particularly when we're talking about diversifying our revenue source. You're saying this is a block that is unexplored because people are not being creative. Delineate for me, please.
I think that Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the region has been playing catch-up in many respects in terms of understanding the value of culture, the value of creative industries, not only simply in terms of identity issues, which are really very important, but also in terms of the commerce that comes from these sectors. Mm-hmm. I think we've flirted with a number of things. We've done some things okay. We've done some things not so okay. But certainly with the emphasis, and it's been political speak and even business speak for a very long time about diversifying. We're talking about Trinidad and Tobago, diversifying the Trinidad and Tobago economy away from the oil and gas. Mm-hmm. And of course, the cultural creative industries present a remarkable opportunity in many, many respects. But before we can talk about export, because I think we get ahead of ourselves, everybody talks about export, and I mean no disrespect when I say that. I think we have to. We first have to do work here. We have to create the environment, which means the institutions, which means the policies, which means the right kind of connection with the education system. We have a whole lot of work to do in those areas if we are going to have the result of having a workforce that is trained up, of having a creative class that understands its business, and will also have the kinds of people and mechanisms for us to be able to take advantage. Now, we're doing some things well, as I said. I mean, people have had individual success. Mm-hmm. We can point to individual successes, whether it's Marshall in the most contemporary context with people like Major Lazer, Bungie Garlin, and this is just music. When you take this and you replicate it across other sectors like fashion, like advertising, like the media industries, these are all part of the creative industries. Mm-hmm. Architecture, photography. So when we aggregate all of these subsectors of what we consider the creative economy, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are either employed or are employable in these sectors. And I think that the challenge for us, and where we really have to do some serious navel gazing and self-critiquing, is following the money and following the trail to see what have we done to ensure that we institutionalize some things in the way in which we've done with oil and gas. Yes, rightly over 100, 200 years, but what have we done with the oil sector? What have we done in tourism? Well, many will say that in Trinidad and Tobago we've not done enough. What have we done in the manufacturing sector? What have we done in tourism? So when you begin to, there's a role. There's a role for the government and the agencies of the state. There's a role for the private sector. There's a role for the banking and financial institutions. And there's a role for the education system. And until we start to connect these dots, then we're just ready, we're pitching marbles.
The voice you're hearing is that of Josanne Leonard. We're talking about the question of our culture in an all-encompassing sense. Now, you mentioned something there. Oftentimes, folks talk of the public-private partnership. You mentioned all three areas, government and business need to come together, need to do their part. However, I always like to say compared to what? So if I take a place where the culture, a part of it, albeit, which is the music of Jamaica, was able to go across the world. Is there anything we can use there as a template or something we can look at there, the commitment, and sort of replicate that? Is this something for a government to do? Is it something for private industry to do? Is there some model we can fashion to have them both work together with a proven track record of it bringing results?
Well, I think that we can look at any number of we can look at any number of, if you want to call it, as you say, models. But I would caution one thing, and that is to say, Rennie, that in terms of the creative sectors globally, what we're facing in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, to different degrees, are being faced by even the more developed, or economies that are said to be developed economies. So, for example, if you look at what's going on in the United Kingdom, there are these revisiting of strategies and revisiting of, say, industrial policy, which then is able to inform what it is that they're doing in any given dispensation or time. So, for example, I've just read a report on the UK where they're talking about the creative industries and their statistics showing that sector is growing by 8.9% a year, which makes it the second fastest expanding industrial sector. We're not really doing that kind of work in the region, and it's not only just specific to the creative industries. This is a problem we have in the region in terms of collecting data, analyzing data, disaggregating data. You made reference to Jamaica and reggae music. You would know that as late as the 70s, for example, Bob Marley's music, the international icon that he is, Bob Marley's music wasn't being played in Jamaica. Reggae music didn't have top billing in Jamaica. And that brings us to a question of media. This brings us to a question of media and new media in this dispensation of being able to have a platform, being able to have an effective platform or platforms, even for what we already have going on. But I think that we need to be serious. Now, I know that there are efforts, for example, in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, there's an attempt by the Economic Advisory Board, again, to kind of have these sort of interconnected conversations. But what we have in the region, and I mean, I have a lot of experience with Jamaica and know a lot of people in Jamaica. Jamaica's brand has succeeded in spite of itself. Because when I sit with my colleagues and we're doing things in Jamaica, it's the same kind of issues that are coming up about what kind of policies are there, what is there by way of incentives, what are there. I mean, the bottom line is there's no money. I mean, there is no real investment being made in the creative sectors. And so the successes are happening in spite of. There's a lot of sponsorship money around in parties and events in the live sector, but there is no real investment. Very practically speaking, you would know, being in New York, that in the 90s, David Bowie floated what was very, very revolutionary at the time, but it was revolutionary for him as a creative, as an artist, and it was revolutionary for the traditional financial sector. They floated a bond on the value of his catalog so that he could have money to invest and reinvest. And so we have a real issue in the region of cultural confidence. Bottom line, the ability for us to create and to sustain strategies and to sustain initiatives based on what is right for us. I mean, gleaning from good examples all over the place, but what is right for us. Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, there are a lot. There's a lot of merit in what you're saying there. You always come down to one junction. However, you must have somebody with the willingness and the effort and the resources to get behind a project. Because while it is true that Jamaica survived in spite of itself, there was a concerted effort once it started bearing fruit, which is part of what Johnny Nash did, open the door, as it were, to that whole American audience. What it did, that's as it relates to Bob Marley, what it did is that the tourist industry, the tourism sector got together behind this.
Right.
And they carried it. I mean, you simply use One Love and you advertise it for your Air Jamaica, as was the case there. What you have done is you've brought in a whole new audience. You've brought a certain level of acceptability because it's now playing in markets hitherto not heard. So there was albeit loose, there was a concerted push.
You're absolutely spot on, because what you've done there, without us doing it in a very structured way, is you've made a connection now between the culture and the creative sector and tourism. Nowadays, it's called cultural and heritage tourism, for example. It's been given a name. In other words, what is it that we offer besides sun, sand, sea? Just as how we have ecotourism, we have cultural and heritage tourism. That's something for which the Caribbean has a particular and distinctive appeal. Every single one of these islands, well, not just islands, because of course Guyana is part of a mainland, as is Belize.
Venezuela, yes.
So I must really be mindful of not calling everybody an island. But you're right. So that when we begin to see the value of culture and heritage and its ability to drive our tourism initiatives, we actually now begin to tap into a whole different, lots of different audiences. In the same way in which you have sports and adventure tourism, or you have ecotourism. You know what I mean? And you're right. Jamaica went with that. They went with that one love. I mean, bless Michael Manley. I think as a politician, he really he signed all his letters. He did everything. He signed as one love. But Bob Marley came after Jimmy Cliff in terms of contemporary music success. Jimmy was already out there. Jimmy was in the UK, but Jimmy was in Africa. And Africa has hundreds of millions of people. And Jimmy came back, and he because of course he had the fallout with Chris Blackwell, which is what the film The Harder They Come is all about. It's really kind of like a biography in a sense. His part in the movie and his lines, his character. Sorry.
It could have been subtitled I Rebel,
the Jimmy Cliff story in a sense, And even Bob, when he came back from the UK, when him and Peter were kind of breaking up, Peter Tosh, and he went back to Jamaica, he really didn't have a sense of because he was just about making his music, And Chris Blackwell was there, and, he already was breaking ties with Jimmy, and so on, and he knows the business. He came from Polygram, and so he took Bob, and he did what he did, and of course, and the whole issue of who controls the music industry and all like that's a whole different discussion. But you're right, Jamaica went with that One Love brand, and it has worked tremendously for them. If we bring it back to Trinidad and Tobago, I really, and I've said this so many times, with all due respect to any current successes, the idea that people talk about, I said it last week at a symposium at Napa, the idea that somebody is talking about taking our music to the world. Hello, wake up, smell the coffee, do your history. Go do your history lessons. If you don't know, ask. Our music was the music of the world. Our music, our calypso music, the mother was out there. There was success. There were record labels. There were deals being made. Yes, Harry Belafonte gave calypso, or a form of calypso, legs in a particular time. We're saying all of these things, Rennie, to say, first of all, we need to understand the value of what we have.
That is the really important part.
You don't understand the value. We're still talking about some youngster coming up saying, I'm going to be the one to take the music to the world. Hello, get in line. You know what I mean? You are of now, but you stand on the shoulders of so many. So that's a big gap, and we need to identify that in terms of the institutions like UTT and the University of the West Indies, that there is a gap on the sociological research and impact that is able to inform how we even negotiate. So, for example, when we have to deal with the WIPOs of the world, the World Intellectual Property Organization, or IFPI, or BPI, or any of these big the heavy hitters, and I'm just using the music industry because it's the driver. Yeah.
Indeed.
When we have to talk with these people, we can't even speak confidently of our success.
There is no data, yes.
Because we have no information. Exactly. So we need a body of work that actually is very quietly putting all of this kind of thing together. Yes, the history of calypso and so, but there is a commercial dimension. There was a time in Trinidad and Tobago in which there were many names in terms of starting record labels and companies, whether it was Sagoms, the Serrao. There were a whole number of record labels. So we had what was a music industry, even in the what would have been considered the traditional sense. And as I said, I'm focusing on music, not to poo-poo any other sector.
But it is the vehicle. It is.
Yeah, it is. It drives. I mean, you have a film, you have to have music. You have to have fashion and a catwalk, you have to have music. You're going to do an animation or whatever it is, you have to have music. Yeah? So the fact that we don't know these things, the fact that we don't know that, in the 60s and in the 70s, we had the equivalent of a big band era. Big band music in the U.S., we had the equivalent of the big band sound in Trinidad and Tobago, and again, the wider Caribbean, because there's a level of insularity that exists in Trinidad and Tobago about the music and the music sector that is actually very, very disturbing. When you think of someone like, bless him, this morning, if Roy is listening, Roy Cape, who came from Grenada, one Sparrow, who came from Grenada, the Mutu brothers, who came from Guyana, and Trinidad represented to the rest of the Caribbean what New York and London represented to us as diaspora people, where we went to have success and make a new life and impact the culture in those places. Trinidad gave that to the rest of the Caribbean in a way in which Jamaica didn't, because Jamaica was very mono with, it was mento and ska and reggae, and so it stayed on that track. That's its brand. But Trinidad, with our composition, with our ethnic composition, we really gave birth to so many different strands and genres of music and musical expression and literature and the rest of it.
That's why it was so important. It is so important that I have you here and that your voice is one that must continue to be heard, because we've touched on a number of things here. One is social media is giving us a chance now to reach the rest of the world. If we look at what government can play in this, is a commitment with a directive to one of our biggest vehicles, i.e. our national airline, put together some pockets here in new advertising that brings in a different set of people as a curiosity. You will reap benefits for this later on, but you must invest for private enterprise to see the reason why they can invest. And even if the government decided to do some incentives, i.e. some tax credits or something for private enterprise to get involved in this in some sort of orchestrated manner to do this, it can work.
We have to be strategic at this point. I mean, we're at war. We're at war, meaning not with, we're at war too with that, because plenty gun and all kind of thing in place, but we're at war for our minds and for our sustenance as a nation and as a region. You've touched on something that I think that we really need. We need to have some very blunt but respectful discussions about the role of some of what we own. For example, we own CNMG. We are the majority shareholder in TSTT. We own Caribbean Airlines. These are assets that we already have in the warehouse. It's not about having a fire sale to get rid of them. It's about having the business strategy, first of all, the vision, and then the strategy and the tactical interventions that are going to allow us to change the conversation.
At the end of the day, if we have a different approach, it is going to change us. God knows I am no bearer for Donald Trump. I'm not. Forget that. However, what he just did 2 days ago, Carrier, he decided to, listen, guys, I'll give you a $7 million tax credit if you will keep your 800 jobs in the United States. We can do the same thing for private enterprise. Here is your deal. I'll give you a tax credit for this. I'm not putting out any money. The Treasury's broke right now. But I'll give you an incentive here if you did this and if you work together with other entities for us to drive this outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I think all of those things, it's a mixed bag. So some of them are direct interventions by way. For example, we need a different kind of tax environment for micro and small businesses. No two ways about it. Because the small entrepreneur and many creatives are single or less than 5, and then they begin to increase depending on their success rate or their ability to penetrate the market. But the aggregate of the creative class, which is, it's just been guesstimations all along, but the aggregate is pretty significant. So when you talk about, I remember, and this is just a little anecdote. Years ago, a couple of us were involved in doing some work in the Laventille area with the East Laventille umbrella organization, and they had the regional complex, and different people were doing different things. And we were looking at the model of the local community station a la Radio Toko, which Michael Alves and they have done very successfully in the northeastern area in Toko. And it was absolutely amazing to me because the directory at the Ministry of what was then the Community Development has come back to something like that now. They had at the time over 300 groups of sport and cultural organizations registered with them. Now, not all of them were probably bona fide or as active or could withstand too much scrutiny, or I don't know. But I'm saying the fact that they had a register of over 300 sporting and cultural groups in that community alone. And some of the work that we did was very simple. Introducing some of those kids who are dropouts or whatever it is to technology, to computers, but making it alive for them. Not because they're not you probably might get 1 in 5 or whoever. I don't have the real information. I'm just speculating here. But what was amazing to me was that we made the connection with the technology and something that was of interest to them. They all love music. Everybody wanted to do music. Not everybody's going to be successful at it. So there was Mark Augustus who was doing a program out to the Ministry of Youth, Sport and whatever it is. And so they were doing a recording studio kind of program. And then we were doing a program where we were saying, okay, so somebody's making music. So when they make music, they have to have a website, or somebody around the corner is making porn, or somebody is designing T-shirts. And we began to make the links to show them where what they were learning, they could then add value to it by actually supporting something in their community. So that's at the community level. But we have serious investment to be made in this sector. And I'm sorry, with all due respect to any administration, because successive administrations have not gotten the memo. So this particular administration is no different to administrations of the past. We do not yet believe, if we believed in what this represents for the country and for economic opportunity and for wealth creation and for real diversification, we would get serious about some of these things. As far as I'm concerned, as somebody who is on a leadership level in the sector in terms of ideas and strategies and what have you, CNMG, TSTT, Carlos, this is something that is not rocket science. You want to talk about the oil sector, you'll get the very best, and you'll sit in a room and you'll say, boy, we're in trouble. What are we going to do? You're going to get the leaders of industry to work with you to map the strategy to say, this is what we need to be doing. We need to have a very serious look at digital infrastructure, because digital infrastructure is what helps to level the playing field. So citizens have a right to be connected, and government has to deal with that in a particular kind of way. But the creative class requires digital infrastructure to be able to monetize their content. And so we need to have the kinds of policies and the incentives, as you've rightly said, tax credits, the kinds of loans that you can get, and we need an entertainment industry investment fund. If we do not have an investment portfolio, then we're not enabling businesses that can graduate, that can actually turn out to be employers and generate money and have international success. If we do not have the money, you cannot go to a bank. I am 60 and I cannot go to a bank and get a loan, regardless of who I am, what I know, what I've done, because they want to know, well, you're really too old now, you can't get how you're going to pay it back, get a mortgage, your grandchildren life now. We do not have an environment that understands the kind of financial incentives and the kinds of financial investment that is required to support businesses in this sector.
You are one of the forward thinkers, and I'm always well informed having a discussion with you, Josanne. Leonard, folks who follow your thinking and would like to do something for the arts. Is there a central base where the folks can come up? I know your Facebook page is there, and folks can get in there and see a couple of things. Is there a place where the intelligentsia in the area of entertainment, in the area of culture, in the area of formulating and projecting our culture outwards, is there a central source folks can come to?
It's amazing that you're saying this, because we've been involved in again, another incarnation of trying to set up what I would call the equivalent of the energy chamber, a creative industries chamber, a chamber of commerce, a chamber of enterprise and commerce. And so, we're probably going to be doing some media and so on it. And it's going to be like any business organization where it's going to be membership driven. We're going to have to articulate what are the benefits. But, we're our worst enemies. If this is the wrap up, we are our worst enemies. I think the sector that is most fragmented in terms of coming together and acting in its own best interests is the entertainment sector, and specifically the music sector. It is very crab in a barrel. People are very individualistic, because creativity is a highly individualistic pursuit anyway. But we have no trade associations, we have no business organizations that are functioning and that are operating in the realm of commerce, and that can sit across the table, even to the people in the ministries, in the chambers of commerce, in the banks, to best represent the aggregate its members' interest.
As soon as
and so unless we do that, then you and I can have this conversation, I'm sure, 10 years from now. Trust me, because we've been doing it for a long time, Rennie, haven't we?
I do understand that, and I'm optimistic that if you can put together this one area where like minds discuss this, maybe we can follow this, because we have the advantage now of social media done properly, and hopefully conversations like this will bring it to the attention of the relevant
people. And people like you as well. I mean, you're from the media sector, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we need our best minds. We need our best minds and experience, because other than that, we're just throwing things at the wall and hoping that some things will stick, but a lot will fall off.
I understand what you're saying. Josanne, Leonard, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me this morning. I truly appreciate having you here.
Thanks, Rennie. Thanks.
You have a good day,
Okay.
and have yourself a good week ahead.